Tonight, we have the select board with us. We have the school committee with us. We have the superintendent and her business manager. Plus representatives from different, we have our finance director, Rainey's here. And we are going to start looking at option 2 or the override budget or Article 5B. All of these things mean the same thing. So if you do hear referred to as 5B, override budget, option 2, that's what it is. We are anxious to review this with the select board, as we are the appointed board as their advisors. But also because of the huge interest that has been generated by the nature of this event, the public as well. So what we'll be doing tonight is Fernando is going to give us a little bit of background on how we got here. Mary is going to give us a review of the revenue so that even though we've gone through it a few times in different forms, I think it would be great to all start in the same place and understand the monies that we have to work with as it stands today and where they come from. We will then proceed. We've done the balanced budget, as you know, and voted that before in December. But then we will start to review with the select board and members of the audience, the 5B override budget option 2. The way that it will progress this evening in the agenda is we will go through that with Rainey and get questions from the select board so that we can either answer them or make notes as to information that we need to get to satisfy their questions so that they can make an informed decision. The finance committee might have additional questions, but we've been examining this for about 6 months. And so many of our questions have already been satisfied. When we're finished with that, then we'll open it up to the public to voice any questions that they might have. And add that to the roster if there are questions that need to be addressed that can't be addressed by the people that are here tonight. So that being said, anything else to add to that?
No, just that this is a process. This is not the end of the process tonight. It's just the beginning. We'll be able to accomplish a certain amount tonight, but it's going to take several more meetings before we can complete our recommended budget. So this is the beginning.
The plan is for every Thursday night?
Correct.
With the select board will be here every Thursday night, so that along with the public, then their questions can be voiced and addressed as best we can.
Until we're done.
Yes, Cindy?
Yeah, do you think for the recording purposes, it would be good to use them?
Oh, thank you. I've never had anybody tell me
I
to
know.
speak up in my entire life, but yes, we do have a mic. And for recording, we will be doing that. So if we pass this down, I'll pass this down to Fernando now. Turning it on is usually a first good step that I missed. I think I was loud enough too.
You were, but I think it's.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right.
Is there one for the audience as well? That might be,
Yeah,
there more than one? But we're not.
Well, but we'll make it work at the end.
Okay, so before we begin, as a member of the Select Board's Sustainable Budget Task Force and former member of the Finance Committee, I'd like to share context, which I think will be helpful to those attending, maybe for the first time and listening to tonight's meeting. The last Proposition 2.5 override for the town of Duxbury took place on April 1989 for the fiscal year 1990, some 34 years ago. As a result, this override process is a new one for the vast majority of us. And because if passed, will impact our taxes, our financial well-being, and so causing great concern, frustration, and in some places even anger. Questions have been raised about who is in charge, who's running the show and making decisions. Is it the select board, the town manager, or is it the finance committee? According to Mass General Law, Chapter 39, Section 16, Chapter 41, Section 59 and 60, and as ruled by the Massachusetts Department of Revenue, the Finance Committee is responsible for preparing and submitting the town's annual budget. So how does this work in Duxbury during a normal fiscal year? In September, the Select Board, Town Manager, Finance Director meet jointly with the Finance Committee, Fiscal Advisory, and School Committee, and kicks off the budget process, directing the town department heads and the school administration to develop the proposed fiscal year's budget. The Finance Committee then meets twice a week to review the proposed budget with the town's department heads and school administration. They analyze, they test, and challenge the numbers presented. The Finance Committee role is to provide independent financial service on behalf of the residents of this town. To quote the Department of Revenue, they are the official fiscal watchdog of the town, tasked to conduct a thorough review of municipal finance questions on behalf of all citizens. By December, the budget work is complete, and in a normal year, there's a balanced budget that goes before the town meeting, presented and recommended by the Finance Committee. The Select Board and School Committee also have the opportunity to review and provide their recommendation or not on the balanced budget. This process represents a fundamental separation of powers within local town government. The Select Board, through the Town Manager, represents the executive branch, and the Finance Committee represents the legislative branch, which essentially is the town meeting. It is also important to note that the Finance Committee is appointed by the moderator, not the Select Board, emphasizing that separation of powers. This year, however, is not a normal fiscal year. We knew at the beginning of the fiscal year 26 budget process, based on our revenue projections, that a balanced budget would be a challenge. The Town Manager appointed a Sustainable Budget Task Force comprising representatives from the Select Board, Finance Committee, Fiscal Advisory, School Administration, and School Committee, led by the Finance Director, to develop a sustainable 5-year financial forecast for the town. A forecast that would provide services that would meet residents' expectations and fulfill ongoing expenditure obligations through regular occurring revenues. In August, the task force informed the Select Board that the upcoming fiscal year 26 budget would require, balanced budget would require cuts and reductions. In December, the Town Manager's balanced budget. It's important to note that this is required by law to be presented at the town meeting, a balanced budget. This budget did reflect those cuts and reductions and would only address fiscal year 26. The task force recommended an override budget to restore those cuts and reductions and add additional funding for the much needed services and programs. The override budget, if passed, would also provide a sustainable 5-year financial forecast for the town, with the assumption that both the school administration and town departments' budgets would limit their budgets in the future to a maximum increase of 3% per year for fiscal year 27 and beyond. So here we are tonight, January 9th, to begin our analysis and to test the challenge the override budget developed by the school administration and town departments. Unlike normal years, we're engaging in a joint effort, not just the Finance Committee in their role as fiscal watchdogs for this town, but also the Select Board and the School Committee, and hopefully with as many residents as possible observing, providing their input, noting the discussion, the push and pull, as we collectively develop a recommended override budget presented at the March town meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Fernanda. Yep. Mary, can I just? Yep, we're gonna pass this down to Mary. Mary McKinnon, our finance director, is going to give us a short overview of the revenue side. So I know that a lot of you were, I'm sorry, can't hear it? Sorry, Mick. Revenue, Mary.
We need to call our meeting to order.
Oh, I'm sorry. I asked Laurel. I thought she said that you had.
Did you? Well, I said we need to call our meeting to order.
Oh.
As long as it's documented that way, that's fine.
Right. All set?
No, call the door.
I'm calling our meeting to order, if that's sufficient. There's something.
It is for me.
Yeah, great.
Okay, Mary's going to speak to us about the revenue, so a nice recap for everybody so that we know the monies that we have to begin the process.
Yes.
Mary?
Good evening, and thank you, everybody, for coming out. It's great to see a big turnout here this evening. I'm gonna go through a slide deck, and I know it's on the TV screen behind a number of heads, so it might not be visible to some folks in the back. However, I will let you know that this is currently available on the town's website right now, so if those of you want to call it up on your phone and follow along, please feel free to do so. You'll find it on the Finance Department page. And there is a section for the January 9th meeting, and there is a link to the slide deck that you can follow along.
Mary, could you tell them the login for the Wi-Fi in case they don't have that? Ken Mayflower?
The Wi-Fi name is COA, and the password is 10 Mayflower with all lowercase. So as Fernando had described in his opening remarks, in order for us to present a budget to town meeting, that budget needs to be a balanced budget, which means that we need to have sufficient revenues to support our expenditures for the coming fiscal year. Those revenues need to be sustainable. And so in order for us to begin to prepare an FY26 balanced budget, we met over a year ago, approximately a year and a half ago, when we were putting together the FY25 budget. And we reviewed our 5-year forecast at that time, a year and a half ago. And it was abundantly clear, and we made all boards aware of the fact that we were facing a structural deficit for FY26. A structural deficit means that there are not sufficient revenues to support the operational budget being presented for FY26 and future years. So we knew quite some time ago that we were facing a serious problem. In order to address that, we asked our department heads to prepare 2 versions of a budget, which is unusual, but given the circumstances, we needed to ask our departments what it would take to run their operation if they were limited to an increase of up to 2.5%, no more than 2.5%, what would that look like? And then we also asked the departments to prepare a second variation, which is in order to properly operate your departments and address real needs for your department, what would that look like? And part of the reason why we asked the departments to prepare that second version is because we know as an organization that over the last several years, we have asked departments year over year to be as conservative as possible and to make severe cuts where they could. If we remember back to COVID, when we knew that we were facing revenue shortfalls due to COVID, we asked the departments to make severe cuts back in 2020. And over the last several years, in many cases, those departments who had endured those cuts from 2020 have not seen the funding restored to their budgets over the last several years. So we've already been at a deficit in terms of the resources that we have been providing to our departments for their operations. And we have now faced this problem. Over the last 5 years, we've also had a number of situations where the town, and not just Duxbury, but towns across the Commonwealth, have sort of had some Hail Marys come their way over the last several years that have helped to support their operations in the form of COVID funding, ARPA funding, Student Opportunities Act funding, and other opportunities that help to support the budget. Those revenue streams or those additional infusions into a municipality's operation have dried up. There are no other additional Hail Marys forthcoming. So we're now faced with this situation. And it is a unique situation. However, it is not unexpected. This town has been sort of teetering on the edge of facing an override for many, many, many years. If you go back and look at annual town reports, you will see that this is a common theme that every year we sort of slide into home base as best we can. However, we are now facing a very real problem that we need to address, and it affects the entire community. So with that being said, facing the structural deficit and receiving those two versions of those budgets from our department heads, the town manager was faced with the task of putting together a balanced budget. And the balanced budget started our process of looking at the FY26 budget. In order for the town manager to prepare that balanced budget, we had to take a very close look at every single department, and it was clear that we could not, with our existing revenues, meet even the minimum requirement or request from our departments without incurring reductions across our organization. So our first pass, in order to produce a balanced budget that looks at using sustainable revenues, resulted in a number of reductions across our organization. At our last meeting, we heard a number of department heads get up and talk about those reductions and the impacts that it would have across the community, and specifically to their various departments. That conversation, as I think we can all agree, was not a pleasant conversation. It was not a desirable outcome for this community. And as a result, we've put together what has been called the contingent budget, where we are asking for the community to support a $5.8 million override. So what we've heard over the last several months is, how did we get here and why now? So I'd like to just cover a number of bullet points that have been previously outlined in the town manager's budget messages that have been delivered to boards and committees and are also available on the town's website. Again, in August of 2023, when we were talking about the FY25 budget, we were all made aware that we were going to be facing this structural deficit, and here we are today. We staved off this situation for many, many years due to additional funding, either from the federal or the state government over the course of the last 6 years. However, there are no additional funding opportunities that are forthcoming of that magnitude. Proposition 2.5, which is a statutory obligation here in the Commonwealth, limits the annual increase on the town's largest revenue source, our property taxes. Our property taxes fund 74% of our budget. And when Proposition 2.5 limits the entire growth of that revenue source to 2.5% annually, you can see that there are constraints on our largest revenue source to support our operation. Over the last several years, it is becoming more increasingly common for the federal government as well as the state government to impose mandates on municipalities. And those mandates are being imposed with no additional funding support. So we are forced to absorb those situations. For example, Mass DEP, whenever they entertain and promulgate new regulations that are imposed on municipalities, either for regulatory issues, compliance issues, we are forced to comply with those, and there is no additional funding to implement those strategies. One of the more recent ones, for example, is that Mass DEP and OSHA now require a municipality to have separate uniforms and equipment for staff who work on the waterworks operation versus staff who work on our sewer department, our wastewater operation. We have staff that work on both, and so in order for them to provide services perhaps in the morning as they're going out to respond to a water main break, when they go to respond to a water main break and then they have to go perform a function for wastewater, once they perform that function for wastewater, they now need to change their uniforms. So we have to now supply additional materials and equipment for them to change to be able to go back to doing work on the waterworks system. So there are things like that that we face day in and day out, where there is no additional funding and we are required to comply with those regulations. We have also, over the last several years, in looking at our revenues, have seen some significant declines in some of our revenue streams that are used to offset our operations. I know we've had numerous conversations, for example, about our beach lease. So we have been incurring rising costs associated with the operation and the lease of our beachfront property. And at the same time, we are faced with declining revenues associated with that operation. When those revenues go away, but the services are still required to be provided, that places downward pressure on our budget and requires us to look at reductions elsewhere. Thought you were playing background music for us.
So sorry.
That's what I usually do, Amy, don't worry about it.
If it wasn't you, it would have been me.
Over the last several years, and this comes as no surprise to anybody, we have been facing some pretty severe inflationary impacts. We're not facing those just here at the town of Duxbury, but we're all facing them within our own homes. We know that the cost of goods and services have increased everywhere we look. And our organization and the cost of us providing services is not immune to those inflationary impacts. There have been pretty severe post-pandemic price increases for goods and services. For example, 3 years ago, when we looked at purchasing an ambulance, we could buy an ambulance for about $300,000. Today's cost is almost $600,000 in a very short period of time. So we know that we have got pretty severe post-pandemic price increases everywhere. We've also faced increases in our fixed costs. Our pension assessment to fund our unfunded pension liability continues to go up on an annual basis. Cost of insurance, whether that's health insurance or even our risk management insurance, our property and casualty insurance. We are seeing continued increases in those premiums year over year. We've also faced a very competitive labor market. Every one of our departments who has tried to fill positions has faced this situation where we have a shortage of labor and the supply and demand is causing the price of labor to increase, and we are not immune to that. We've got increased service expectations. Nobody wants to see a decline in the high quality services that we provide here to this community. This community has a wealth of activities and access to a lot of different types of services provided here, and we don't want to see a degradation in that. The community has made that abundantly clear. And we know that we have a dire need to address deferred maintenance of our town assets. So that requires that we provide sufficient resources in our budget for maintenance services, for supplies, for parts, for materials, and for large scale projects, like our school roofs and other issues that have needed attention for quite some time. And we need to make sure that we have the resources to protect the assets of the town. And so what this all boils down to is that essentially our expenditure growth has outpaced our revenue growth. And that is why we're here today. As a reminder, we are a service-driven organization. 73.94% or 74% of our budget is attributable to labor. That is the cost of compensation as well as cost of benefits for the labor that we provide to cover all of the services here in this community. We are not a factory where we are developing a product and we can increase production. We are a service-driven organization. So as Fernando had articulated, in order for us to address this problem, town administration created the Sustainable Budget Task Force that met numerous times over the course of the summer. We took a deep dive into a lot of demographics about the community as well as our available revenue opportunities to see where we could maximize those. And we also took a look at all of our departments. We met with individual department heads to talk about their operation and to look for efficiencies or cost reductions where we could find them. During the course of that process, we also provided several updates to the select board, alerting them that there were very limited opportunities in order to maximize any other non-taxable revenues. And as a result, the Sustainable Budget Task Force made the recommendation that we need to pursue a Proposition 2.5 override in order to address our revenue gap. At our last several meetings, we took a look at our available revenues and looked at our 5-year forecast in order to ensure that our revenues were sustainable through our projections, in order to make sure that we're asking the community for the right level of support. As a result, in our forecast, based on our projections and based on conservative increases going forward, the end result was that we would be facing a $5.8 million override request of this community. So with that being said, I think tonight's objective is to start to talk about our override or contingent budget and start to go through the individual line items. Before we do that, does anybody have any questions?
What was the time frame we were looking at for sustainability into the future with this one-time override?
Good question, and if everybody didn't hear that, the question was, what is the time period for the forecast that we are using in order to develop our recommendations? It is a 5-year forecast, so FY 26 through FY 30.
Is that for the town or for the town and school?
Combined, town and school. The question was, is that 5-year forecast for just the town? And the answer is no. When we prepare a general operating budget, it is inclusive of all departments.
That doesn't include capital, right?
That does not include capital. Capital is a completely separate budget from the operating budget.
Okay, Madam Chair, can I just ask a general question? I think many people in the audience are thinking, but I don't know when the right time is to ask.
The select board is going to be,
Can't hear you back here.
I'm so sorry, so sorry. Yep. Mickey, come up front.
There is indeed Ricky that I'm looking at, sorry, but the lights are.
We get better.
We'll get better at being able to do this type of meeting.
So the question was, I do have a question. I don't know when the appropriate time is to ask. I think it's.
The select board can ask now,
Okay.
that we're going to open up to general questions at the end of Randy's
And maybe
presentation.
this can be addressed during the presentation at some point.
Yep.
But I've certainly we've all heard from lots of people, about this, and I've heard from a number of seniors in particular. And this question isn't for anybody specifically, but if you can answer it, I'd be happy to hear. We've seen, anybody who's opened their tax bill last week, we've seen significant increases in assessments. Some have been eye-watering. We just heard about increases in water rates that are coming, for valid reasons. Our DPW facility, which is much needed, is gonna hit the tax bill in the near future. We are still paying for the co-located middle and high school, fantastic facility that we need. What we're talking about tonight is just another component of our overall expense to live in Duxbury, the 5.8 million. So the question, based upon that premise, is what resources, and this is specific to seniors and those on fixed income, what resources will be available or are available to seniors and those on fixed income to shoulder the additional burden? And I'm thinking things like senior and veteran tax work-off. Are there other things, Mary, maybe that you can suggest? Because I know that there are lots of folks who are understandably panicking about some of the numbers we're talking about. Thanks.
I can yell pretty loud.
No,
It's for the recording, unfortunately.
Great. So there are several options that are available to folks who meet certain qualifications. There is a set of statutory exemptions that are allowed under Mass General Law. Again, all of this information is available on the town's website. With respect to statutory exemptions, those are, the information for that is available on the assessor's website. So the state legislature has outlined a number of different programs that are available to either veterans or other eligible citizens who qualify for things like if they are blind, if they are disabled, if they are a surviving spouse of a veteran, if they are a family member of law enforcement that was killed in the line of duty. There are a number of programs that people can apply, and if they are eligible, then the assessor's office would administer those exemptions or reductions on their tax bill. In addition to that, there is a senior tax work-off program. That program right now is limited to about 25 to 26 participants based on the available funding that is in the budget to cover that. And so if I could just digress for a second and explain to folks how the senior tax work-off program is funded, and then I will explain that we can, the expansion of that program. So the senior tax work-off program needs to be funded through our budget. It's funded through what's called an overlay account. So it's a line item in our budget where we raise funding, and folks who participate in that program and provide volunteer services to the community across a wide variety of our departments, those folks are eligible for a reduction on their tax bill. That reduction is paid for through the overlay account. So it's money that we raise in our budget, and then we use it to provide this reduction to folks in that program. Right now, the funding that has been available allows up to 26 participants to participate in that program. The FY26 budget that we're talking about has a line, the overlay line item has been increased to allow additional participation in that program of approximately 16 additional folks who would then be eligible to participate and be eligible for that reduction. To that point, we have coordinated through the senior center the opportunity to set up and hold approximately 3 training sessions here over the course of January and February. And the first session in February, the dates are to be determined. We're looking at availability of room space. But the first session in February will focus on some tax relief opportunities and these statutory programs, as well as the senior tax work-off program, and make that information available for everybody. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Rainey, are you gonna take the real first?
Thank you. I just wanted to piggyback a little bit on what Brian is saying, because I feel very strongly that as we proceed with these conversations, and I am appreciative that there are some abilities for some of the seniors to get some relief, but I'm concerned not just for the seniors, but for many of our residents here in town when it comes to these types of increases in our taxes, along with our increases in assessments, which are really significant. And I think it's important to not look at this in a vacuum. We have to very clearly articulate what we know is coming before the town. Maybe not at this town meeting, but at the next, or maybe the next after. And we can only share what we know is coming. So what we know is that the seawall has that has yet to hit our tax bill, that cost, that price tag. The DPW that also has not yet hit our taxes. And I'm gonna ask when, I'm gonna hope to get an idea of when those are gonna be reflected on our tax bills for the public. We know that we need to do PFAS mitigation and water infrastructure projects. We had a presentation on that last night. That is a $38 million price tag to start. There is a chance this could be, this year, next year. It's coming. It is absolutely coming. All of these things, it's just so important to think about all of the things that we know about when we have this conversation. That's all I'd like to say. And if you could just let us know, Mary, when those two, the seawall and the DPW, are gonna hit the tax one.
Just to answer that, thing too. This $5.8 million override. That part of that is to pay for the yearly debt exclusion pieces of that, of those voter approved debt exclusions, correct? The 5.8 million.
So I'm holding up a chart that is our debt model, and I don't know that we have this in here tonight, but we did hand it out at the last meeting, and it's also, again, available on the town's website. If you look at our debt model, what you'll see is that in FY 26, so in FY 25, a small portion of the DPW facility did in fact hit your tax bills. So we did issue debt in order for that project to get started, and so a small portion has hit your tax bills. Beginning in FY 26, you will see an additional portion of hit the tax bills for both the DPW facility as well as for the seawall. So in FY 26, there'll be about $856,000 worth of debt that will be incurred to begin to pay back those projects.
The seawall is inaccurate on the debt model spreadsheet. The voters dropped it to 15 million this past town meeting, and we have a $3 million. Thanks. The seawall dropped to $15 million this last town meeting. It's on there as 20 million.
So I'm not sure which model you're looking at, but the one that is dated, lower left-hand corner dated December 9th.
12, 19, 24.
So the current debt model reflects the $15 million seawall. This is the one that was handed out at the last meeting. So rows 117 through 125. Okay, that does reflect the reduction. So you'll see that there are the first two, row 117 through 119 and 120 through 122. Those are bands. So the first one is a $5 million ban, the second one is a $10 million ban. That is a temporary note until we have the final cost of construction. And if you look below it where it says GOB for general obligation bonds, that is the permanent financing of up to $12 million. So that takes the reduction into account. So the $12 million permanent financing plus the $3 million grant is the $15 million project cost.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mary, just for clarification, maybe repeat this right, but the 5-year plan, Sustainable Budget Task Force, the plan that's been derived includes the debt model, includes the DPW, and includes the seawall. It does not yet include, because we haven't programmed that out, the PFAS remediation.
That is correct. On that 5-year sustainable debt model, you'll see a line there called debt exclusion. Separate from the override line, that debt exclusion does include the debt service for those two projects, for the seawall and for the DPW facility, built into the 5-year model.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I'm gonna,
Quicker than.
thank you so much. I'm gonna hand it back so we can start working on the actual, budget, for the, omnibus budget. Rainey, are you gonna drive this? So, yep, let me give this to you. And we'll start going through it and, be able to field questions from finance or the select board. Hopefully, some of the questions that the audience might have might be answered during the course of the presentation, but if not, make some notes. We're gonna be getting to you at the end and we will then get the questions. All right? Okay, there you go, sir.
Hi, everybody. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
I'm Randy Reed. I'm the town manager. You may have noticed that we had handouts. They look like this. The debt model handout that Mary mentioned is available online. I didn't make handouts of that for this evening, but this is a 5-page copy of the operating budget. And what I want to do is point out a couple of columns. The first one, the first column in the peach color is the balanced budget that was reviewed by the finance committee back in December. They voted their recommendations on that. It has not yet been placed into the warrant. We're still working on that, but those are the numbers that we're basing our override off of to begin with. The next column I want to draw your attention to is called Article 5B, and in that you will see some little blue squares that have been highlighted here. Those are the figures for the override. That's the contingency budget. And then I want to draw your attention finally to the far right column, which says total. That is the total of Article 5A to 5B. So that's the entire dollar amount that goes all the way down to the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to be highlighting I'm going to be discussing the items under Article 5B. So anything that's in blue. What I'll do is I'll discuss the department that they're located in, the dollar amount, what it's for, and if you have any questions, I'll take the half of the field with me. Okay. So the first line, line 1, falls under expenses under the town meeting line, and that is $300, and a $300 increase over the $2,500, and that's for the printing of town meeting materials. The costs have gone up enough that we needed to add $300 to that line. The next line is line 3, which is the salaries line in the select board town manager line. The $51,000 you see there is to restore one full-time equivalent position from a reduction in force. Under the balanced budget scenario, we would have to lay off one person in our office, and that is the administrative assistant to the select board. Below that, you see a proposed increase of $50,000 for professional services for mid-year projects. What that is an amount of money to allow the town to be able to hire engineers or other consultants over time. The last 3 to 4 years, we've had a need to hire engineers to come in and do drainage work for us or other smaller projects. We have realized that not having an engineer on staff, it would be very beneficial for us to be able to do that. Again, the object here isn't to inflate the budget or drive numbers up just for the heck of it. The idea is to make the budget sustainable. And the past 3 or 4 years have shown us that we have had a need to do this because in other instances, we've had to hit the reserve fund to find the money to be able to do those kind of things. The next line is line 8 for the accounting department under salaries. The $69,700 you see there would restore the one full-time equivalent from RIF, which is the assistant town accountant position. And also an overtime increase for year-end tasks. When we say year-end tasks, when the accounting office has to close the books for the year-end, it does take quite a bit of time, so we need to be able to provide overtime hours for that.
Randy, maybe just the point is when people are looking at this,
Yeah.
maybe you can speak to your microphone there, but if you look at the fiscal year 25, that very first column, that is this year's budget, right?
Correct.
So Article 5A, you look at that line 8, the Article 5A had a reduction, right? So it went from 404.7 to 336, right? And so that 69, it sounds like an increase, but actually, when you look right across Articles 5A and 5B, it is $405,706, which compares to 2025 is only $1,000 more. All right, so I think you just need to, I know we're focusing on, and we're talking about the blue bit, but I think people need to look at all columns to understand the impact at the end, yeah?
Agreed. But in this case, when we arrive at town meeting,
Yeah.
there will only be 2 columns contemplated, and that will be one Article 5A will
Yeah.
be that one balanced budget.
Yeah.
Article, and then Article 5B will be for the contingent budget.
No, that's agreed. It's
You're
just,
right.
but just a point for people to understand and to understand the impact That's all. Yeah, thank you.
You're absolutely right. Thank you.
Randy, just before you continue on. The compensation study that was given to us in December, is that included in 5A or 5B? Could you explain that and how that will play out
Yeah,
in
I
future years?
will at the end, get Jeannie Horn here, and we will cover that at the end.
So is it a yes? Is it included in these numbers?
Is it?
No, it's in
No,
a separate
It's
article.
in Article 4.
Does it have a number? And if it isn't, does it have a number associated with it?
I don't have it.
Yeah.
Yes,
Do we have?
yes.
Oh, yeah, it does. Yes, there you go.
Okay,
600,000.
so I'll wait until the end on that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So Article 9, line 9, expenses under accounting, is an increase of is a proposed increase over the Article 5A of $6,790. And that's to allow for training of new staff and procurement training for the department heads. Under line 11, salaries in the assessor's office, that's to restore a half-time position, an administrative assistant from a RIF. In the amount of just over $26,000. In the expense line, line 12, $855 increase in map printing, postage and seminar fees. Under line 13 of the treasurer collector's office, $10,000 would be allocated for part-time seasonal staff for sticker sales, and to increase the part-time hourly rate to recruit and retain staff, excuse me. Under line 15, an addition of $5,750 to increase town council fees and expenses. Under
Are we
human resources.
supposed to be, I'm sorry, are we supposed to be saying hold and some of these items? that-
No, what I'll do is I'll just open it up because I'm sure everybody will have a lot of questions. So we'll
Thank you.
we'll kind of go around the table and then we'll go around them. If that's okay. Under line, excuse me, under line 17, human resources expenses, just over $5,600 for additional medical screening, for background checks and other onboarding costs when new hires. And the second page. Line 26. Salaries in the planning board. This is the addition of a new position. Of the assistant planning director, environmental planner. And that also includes mileage allowance for the new position. In the amount of just under $94,000. Under line 28. Facilities management salaries. This will be adding 2 full-time positions, a maintenance manager and administrative assistant. Again, the idea here is sustainability. We've seen a tremendous demand on the facilities department, and the one person doing the work to manage just under 70 buildings is a little bit much to ask about. So we realize and we recognize that there's a need there. Increase staff. Under line 29, expenses under facilities management. Again, the idea is sustainability, and we want to increase the property repairs and maintenance services and supplies to maintain the public assets. And that would be in the amount of $162,000. In the police department, under line 30, you see an additional $373,000, which would be to restore the 2 full-time positions from a RIF, and also add 2 additional full-time patrol positions to allow the PD to go from 4 sectors, to go to 4 sectors, and they can drop to 3 whenever there's an injured on duty or a sick duty. The expense line in the police department, line 31, would increase by $11,500 for ammunition, uniforms, which also includes for the new FTE proposed above. In the fire department, line 32, $651,964. That represents the restoration of 2 firefighters in the RIF and an additional 4 firefighters, EMTs, to the department. Under line 33, expenses, there would be an additional $7,000 for turnout gear, which includes the new FTE proposed above, and other funding would come from grants. Under line 34, municipal services, we would restore the half of the FTE from a RIF, which is the administrative assistant to the Board of Health. It's also a mileage stipend for the assistant inspector for use of the personal vehicle. The expense line in municipal services would increase by $100, which is the telephone expense for the mobile tablet used by that department. Under line 36, the harbor master salaries line, an additional $200 for the CBA pump out boat increase, 75% of which is reimbursed from the state grant. The expense line, line 37, would increase by $1,275 for office supplies, printing, and vehicle repair supply. On page 3, under central building services, with the public works department, line 40, the expense line would increase by $11,200. To increase, to allow for the increase in repairs and maintenance services, electricity and maintenance supplies to reflect the actual needs. Under line 41, expenses for the Garfield Community Center, $575 utility expense, and it's needed for the DPW relocation, which they'll be living in that building for the next 18 to 24 months. Under line 42, in animal control, the salaries, an additional $335 for additional hours for coverage when the animal control officer is out on vacation or sick. And the expense line number 43 will increase by $1,250 for animal supplies and property repairs. Line 44 in lands and natural resources, the salaries line would increase by $62,962, which would restore a laborer position, which would otherwise be ripped. And then we'll also address the longstanding overtime deficit we've had in that department as well. Line 45, the expense line would increase by just over $26,000 for building and grounds maintenance services and supplies, handheld equipment such as trimmers and saws, fertilizers, uniforms, and clothing. Line 47 in the DPW administration would increase by $70,600 to restore the office manager position that would be ripped with the other scenario. It would move just over $7,500 funding from the sewer department, the stipend for the OSHA compliance services. In the expense line, line 48, we would be adding $13,550 for the MS4 permit services. It's a state requirement. Under line 49, vehicle maintenance salaries, we would restore the full-time position of a mechanic who had been ripped and increase the overtime in uniforms. And the expense line, line 50, would increase by $1,500 for vehicle parts and supplies. Under line 51, highway road maintenance, under the salaries line, we would restore the 2 full-time positions that would be ripped, the skilled labor and the equipment operator positions. Under line 52, expenses, we would add an additional $27,600 for road and bridge services and supplies, tools, signs, and uniforms. On line 56, transfer station salaries, it would be an increase of just over $3,400 for overtime, increased at a much lower level than requested because this incorporates the reduced hours of the operation. Under line 57 in expenses, would increase by just under $26,000 to allow for appropriate funding of tipping fees, catch basin cleaning, building and grounds maintenance supplies, and equipment repair. Under the sewer department, line 59 expenses would increase by $26,500 for repairs and maintenance. Page 4, the cemetery department, the salaries line 60 would be increased by $19,600 for summer help and grounds maintenance. Line 61, the expense line would increase by $22,050 for utilities, retort repairs, and cremation supplies. Line 62, under council on aging, would be increased by $17,000 to allow the cafe manager position to go from part-time to full-time. Line 63, under expenses, would increase by $21,500 to account for food supplies and to restore professional development. Line 68, line 61, the library salaries line. We would restore the Sunday hours and add a full-time position for a children's librarian. The amount would be not just over $95,000. For line 71, the Percy Walker pool salaries, we would propose to increase it by just over $12,000, which is the increased hourly rate for recruitment and retention of lifeguards. In line 74, beach lifeguard salaries, that would increase by just over $5,600, which is the increased rate again for recruitment and retention of lifeguards. And the expense line would increase by $2,000 over line 75 for equipment repairs. In line 76, beach operations salaries, we would be adding a full-time position for an assistant beach operations manager and increasing the part-time staff due to the beach closure and escorting coverage. We want to see if we can do escorting at the beach if necessary when the public builders are have arrived. And the beach ops manager is definitely in need of a break once in a while, and this additional position would give him that opportunity to take a break. Under line 77, expenses and beach ops, be an increase in vehicle repairs, uniforms, and supplies in the amount of $4,550. Under line 78, expenses, celebrations, $25,000, support the July parade. We're proposing to move it into the operating budget since it's an annual operating expense. Currently, it lives in an article on its own, but it makes more sense to have it in the operating budget if that's another thing. Line 79, school department salaries. The increase over the Article 5A number would be $1,995,415. Which would restore the RIFs in that department and allow for a market adjustment for compensation. Line 80, for the school department expenses, would increase by $604,000 for the various expenses that they've accounted for in their budget. Under line 83, employee and retirement and retiree health insurance would decrease by $14,830. Line 87, unemployment would decrease by $550,000 because it wouldn't be needed if the risks are all restored. We wouldn't have to pay an unemployment cost. And line 89, the reserve fund, we would propose to increase the reserve fund by another $50,000. And on line 91, the interest on bonded debt would increase by $200,000, which is our capacity for the closing debt. And then below that, you have sort of a synopsis of everything that we've just talked about. Down at the very bottom, under the $4.7 million, you'll see that there's a $1 million line. That would be the additional excess levy capacity for year one. And you total it all up, equals $5.8 million. If you look over on the far right column, on the very bottom, the entire budget, balanced budget plus the contingency budget would come to $98,014,044. I'm happy to try to answer any questions you have.
One of the things that might be helpful is the lot to absorb. And not to put the schools on the spot, but we have received, the whole school committee is here with us tonight. We're going to be going through these numbers over the course of the next few Thursdays. And the school superintendent and the business manager and the assistant superintendent are also here. So if possible, if you have questions regarding the school budget, and we can present them, at least if the answers are not readily available, at least the folks that are going to be involved in finding your answers are here and either respond or have a chance to get their information gathered to respond at another time. But I don't want them to have to come back every week unless they want to, and then they are more than welcome. That might be too much to ask for, but I don't know, Mike? Yeah, wait a sec, Mike.
For the public's understanding, could somebody explain the market adjustment for compensation?
If I could add to that too, the difference between that 1 million roughly is not a number, the difference between the RIF restoration and that market adjustment, which is which.
So the market adjustment is based off of our last contract negotiation with our Unit A teaching staff. When we settled on a contract, we agreed to take a look at a unbiased market analysis to see if our Duxbury teachers and our instructional assistants, our custodial staff and administrators fell within the market average range of comparable school districts to Duxbury. And so we were aiming to see if our teachers and other staff members landed in that middle section of the average range. And what was determined from the market analysis was that our teaching staff are about 4% below market average. So that is the number that you see. Go back to that page. So the $1,088,864 represents that 4% market adjustment. And can you repeat the question that you had from?
What did you just say?
Okay, yep, and then, we had our reduction budget, we would have some FTEs that would have needed to be eliminated, so that was those were separate items. And if there's anything else, I can just stay up here.
I have several questions for the. full budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. When you're speaking of the comparable districts for the comp adjustment, are those the same districts that we're comparing ourselves to for example, the kindergarten tuition? And I know a number, you've got a fairly thick budget, which is great to have all this detail, but in a number of places we're comparing Duxbury versus other communities. Are we consistent in this budget, in the school budget, as to what districts we're talking about in terms of comps across all categories?
So, we have, as a school district, we use the term DART. When we look at DESE has DART districts. So those are the districts that the Department of Education has identified as being most comparable to Duxbury, looking at a number of factors. Our enrollment size, our community income, low income, a lot of different variables. So when we did the market analysis for compensation, we looked at our DART districts at the time, and those change from year to year. So at the time when we did the market analysis in 2023, we used our comparable districts that were identified at that time. We also looked at some of our regional comparisons, because we're drawing from a pool of educators, potential educators that would be applying for schools, for jobs in schools in Duxbury. So we did look at our surrounding communities in terms of what the rates are, but generally speaking, we used school districts. There's a couple of local South Shore school districts that are considered to be DARTs for us, which would be Hingham, Situate, Norwell, Pembroke. So actually, some of those are DARTs and some of those are regional comparisons. So we try to do both, because when we're looking at who will be hiring, we have to consider both. We're not necessarily the same as a Longmeadow, which is in a different region of the state, but we take all of those things into consideration.
Okay, thanks. I have a few more questions.
Welcome, Stan.
Yes, thank you. There we go.
Okay.
Okay, appreciate it. On some of the line items here, and not to put you on the spot, but if anybody knows this, sped transportation is going up 147%. Can we speak to why that's so significant?
Yes, this is, it's just a phenomenon that's all districts across the state are facing. There's significant increases in transportation costs, and it's just mind-boggling how much it costs for individual students to be traveling to not very far distances. There's not a lot of competition, and so the companies that do that transportation have a monopoly on the whole process. So we are always, our special education directors here, and Teresa, if you want to speak to that, but we're always looking to see if there's new companies that are offering a better rate. And we try to carpool with our transportation whenever we can, and we try to keep our students in district whenever we can. And if you can add anything to that phenomenon.
Yeah, the transportation cost has increased really significantly. I would say they've doubled in the last 4 to 5 years. On average now, we spend about $300 per day for a van ride for a student to get to and from school. Depending on the distance, it can go up to $400, $425 a day. So we're doing a number of things. We're sharing rides with other districts. And when I'm placing students, I'm looking at proximity and working with the transportation company to say, we can put these 3 kids together as opposed to having 3 separate van rides. If parents are willing and are able to transport, it's much more cost effective to reimburse those parents under the federal guidelines at that rate. So there are some parents who are doing that. So we're constantly looking for ways to save money, but it is just a phenomenon, and Lisa will tell you as well. I've met with a number of companies and they're all in the same ballpark. So it's not like there's some out there that are much cheaper than others, but most importantly is the quality of service. We want to make sure for our students that we have companies that are vetted, experienced, they know how to transport students with disabilities and are prepared for that. The safety of our children come first. So there are companies popping up if they see an opportunity, but if they've never done this or have limited experience, it's not worth putting children into a situation that might not be the best.
You should get another microphone.
We were hoping for that.
Another question, under district administration, this is under your real needs budget. We're looking at an increase of 323%, going from 477,000 to 1.5 million. And that's for district administration and instructional leadership. And I was hoping you'd speak to that.
What page are you on?
This is page, it's exhibit 5 of the fiscal 26 real need budget.
Administrative adjustments and the funds.
Why don't we have Lisa stand up? She does it as opposed to.
So that's exhibit, looking at exhibit.
Brian, is there the page number?
No,
It's from our original budget binder, one of the financial exhibits.
I can just easily speak to that. So that is the placeholder for the market adjustment and a number of administrative or administration adjustments, that we put in one place.
I
It
thought
was
I
in the
heard
budget.
4% as an adjustment.
Say that again?
I thought I heard we're looking at 4% for adjustment. For the-
Yeah,
for the
But
pay.
there's more than just that in that category that you're looking at.
Okay. Thank you.
So it's not necessarily, administration includes more than a school administrator.
Okay.
That includes, technology staff, administrative assistants, and the placeholder for the teaching market adjustment, but that's just where that is stored. It's not just school administrator, so it's kind of deceiving the name of that category.
Okay. I see, Amy, if you want to, piggyback on that, otherwise I have two questions and I'm done.
Kind of segues into my question, which was, you did a comparison study for your compensation. Have you compared our district to other similar districts when it comes to administration staff? Where do we compare in the numbers of our admin?
So we have done that, we look at school districts have different models for how they're, configured in terms of curriculum support, and, we're certainly in our central office comparable to the, we have a superintendent, assistant superintendent, director of business and finance, one human resources director in our district, as well as, our special education director. In terms of, we are a little bit lean in terms of other business offices. We have one payroll, we have one accounts payable. So we're definitely comparable. We look at all of our we look at our comparative districts, both in the South Shore and with our dark districts frequently. And, what we find is that the way we do our curriculum in grades 6 to 12 may be a little bit different than other districts that don't have a co-located, middle school and high school. So we're fortunate in that we, instead of having department heads that only are able to support the high school, we're able to have administrators in curriculum that do grades 6 to 12. So we certainly don't have any positions that are out of the ordinary in our comparable districts. And in fact, there are a couple of our dark districts such as Hingham and Wellesley that have a number of different administrative positions that we do not have. But the way we do it in Duxbury, we feel it's the most efficient based on our financial situation and the way our schools are configured. And so we do, all of us are in network groups with our different superintendents, principals, and the directors of business and finance. So I think we're right on track with that. And when we did the compensation study, we were able to match up the salaries from other school districts comparable to ours with those similar positions. And during that time, we didn't have extraordinary positions that were really unique to others. I don't know if there's anything else you could add to that.
Well, I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but it seems to be,
Thank you.
again, nothing you probably haven't heard, but I hear a lot of residents that seem to be concerned about the amount of admin that we have. I mean, I think everybody wants, a lot of teachers, smaller class sizes, but when it comes to admin, that is where I think there are a lot of people that are concerned that we're heavy on the admin.
Well, I'm glad you asked that, and I will just take this opportunity to share. I've heard the same thing, and I think that it's really important for people that may be asking that question to know that we have a $45 million school budget. An organization where we have 3,000 students, we have between 400 and 500 staff members, and we have the parents in the community that we're serving. And so our administrators, in some cases, are that middle management of, we can't just have workers that come in and teach the students. There's so much that goes into instructing our students and having a smooth running school district and school day. And so our administrative layer is really serving as, schools have to have a building-based management approach. And so when we look at our elementary schools, we have approximately 600 students with really unique needs, and we have 3 administrators that support, that entire student population at the elementary school. So you have your principal, assistant principal, and your curriculum supervisor, as well as the team chair that is really focused on the special education team meetings and service delivery. And so when you look at the ratio of administrators to staff, when it comes to evaluation, we have administrators that are doing evaluations that have 12 steps that are servicing 30, it's like a 35-to-1 ratio, or it's a 200-to-1 ratio for students. And then when you look at district administration, we have the oversight of the whole district. And so we are always looking to consolidate. If we have positions that are redundant, if we can reduce positions, we always do. We, I think, have eliminated over the last 2 years and reduced, when we hear about, people have asked us about our declining enrollment. When are we going to see some reductions? We have eliminated, I think, 13.8 positions over the last 2 years in order to just make sure we're functioning most efficiently. When it comes to the secondary level, the way we do our curriculum supervisor positions, that would be, if anyone's wondering about that administrative layer. In districts that have department heads, you will probably have a teacher at the high school level that's more towards the second half of their career, where they're probably looking at a salary over $100,000. And then there would be a stipend that would be given if you were then doing the department head. And so you could be looking at someone on the teaching level that is having, the salary would work up to be $115,000 to $120,000 as a teacher serving as a department head. And that would be a similar salary to what our curriculum supervisors are receiving, except our curriculum supervisors can assist with the evaluation caseload. They can do the oversight of their department by content area, which is really important. And I think it's just really important to note that the administrative staff, their job is to support the teachers in the building. It's not to be someone that is looking at the teaching staff and trying to get anyone to stay in line and be in trouble. We're there to every single day to make their job easier, so that when the thousands of students are entering our building, they can be safe and our procedures are smooth and the kids are coming to and from school, managing the buses and all the other intricacies of running a school department. We need to have that layer so that the teachers can teach, because like in any company, workers don't just come in and go into their classrooms and teach and not have any issues that come up during the day. So it's really important that our families have people that they can reach out to if there's a concern or an emergency or an issue that comes up, that can assist with that. And so if there's any questions ever in the community about the purpose of some of our administrative team, we are happy to explain exactly what that job is, more than just your job description, because I think it's hard to look at a job description and really see what any of our positions entail. And so our job is really to make sure that when we're asking taxpayers to have significant tax increases and to support our budget, we can't have positions that are unnecessary on our roles. And so it's really important. It's my job to make sure that if there's positions we can consolidate and combine, we do that whenever we possibly can. And so all of our administrators, we've looked at the positions and it's just, there's not a lot of room to be able to remove people and still be able to perform what we're doing at the highest possible level. We want everything to be as smooth as possible, but situations do come up and there's concerns of our families that we need to address quickly. And so I've heard that too, and I would just encourage if you hear that, any questions about the purpose of some of these administrative positions to ask us about it and what exactly these positions are responsible for on a daily basis.
Can I add something really quickly to that question? Is that okay?
I think that the two things that I try to consider when you think about administration and leadership are, one, are they necessary? Are the staff members necessary? And two, are they compensated fairly? So the wage study that was done in June of 2023 as part of that DTA collective bargaining agreement, that study did not cover all of the administrative titles and staff that we have. But the ones that it did cover bore out that the team is 2.5% less, or compensated 2.5% less than the 15 comparable districts. If you fill in the other administrative and leadership roles that were not covered in the study, that number actually balloons to 10.1% under the comparable districts. So our administrative and leadership team are compensated about 10% less than the 15 comparable districts in the study. And if you look at the roles themselves, there are no roles that I could find that are outlier roles that those comparable districts don't have. So, I mean, I think one of the things that Mary said at the beginning that the town side is challenged with are growing number of regulations and growing number of mandates that are unfunded. And the school is not immune from that. The school has the same, if not more. So the administrative team that we have is necessary, in my view, and they're working for a lower compensation wage than the districts that they were compared to. So I think if you sort of just look at it on balance, are they necessary and are they compensated fairly? The answer to are they necessary is yes, and are they compensated fairly? No, but that's the reality.
Brian, do you want to
I have two
finish up?
more and then I'm done. Sure.
Look, it's a funny.
The Chandler handicap ramp, my understanding, to be repaired. Can somebody explain why it's $250,000 worth of repairs?
That's where Katie St. Clair would be really handy to have this conversation. When Katie joined us, our new facilities director, she did an analysis of all our school buildings, and what she found was that the Chandler handicap ramp on the side of the building where the buses are parked is crumbling. There's a planter that was added to that leaks, and it's caused there to be a lot of cracking and damage. And she noted that in the because it's retaining moisture, it can be really slippery and even a fall hazard. So our ramp is definitely crumbling and not safe. We had some pictures that we had available on our capital presentation that I can share with you. But that was one of the hazards that she noted when she came in, which hadn't been on our radar screen on a previous capital analysis that we had done. There's also a loading dock behind Chandler School where there is, the ground has shifted and there's a screen that is sticking up. So we aren't able to back vehicles into that area. So it's definitely not a safe place to walk. And we want to make sure we have our buildings as accessible as possible for anyone who needs the wheelchair ramp. So that's something that needed to be addressed as soon as possible.
And the birds.
The birds, well, Chandler School, and so if you've ever walked in Chandler School, whenever you go, I know Lisa's here, there's people that walk in and out of the side building of the building, there's bird nests that have birds just love, it's like a bird sanctuary at Chandler, where you're in the overhang, there's a lot of nesting. And when Katie came in, she just said, we've been cleaning it up as best we can, and Dr. Rieselman's here to notice that we are just always having to power wash the entrances because there's a lot of bird poop in there. There's sometimes dead birds when we're walking in, and it's just not safe, and that carries a lot of disease. And so we wanted to remediate that issue as well. So the birds and the ramp.
Remove the bird.
Relocate.
Relocate the bird.
Yeah, I'd ask if there's a way to maybe sharpen a pencil on that ramp. I understand we need it,
but there's plenty of roofs in other buildings around town that are either aluminum or, I'm not looking to micromanage it, but it seems like a lot of money.
Can I address that for 1 second?
Okay, I have one more question.
Yeah, no, just to your point, I just want to let you know that given the cost of that project, can everybody hear me? Given the cost of that, no?
No.
I'm screaming. I just want to clarify, 2 things. Number one, we have our department heads, queued up to attend and participate in future meetings, so we can address, specific questions with specific department heads, at future dates as well, and Katie can certainly speak to that. But given the, cost of that project that you're talking about, Brian, that does require us to go out to bid and receive competitive bids. So that's a budgetary estimate right now, and, we will do our best to get the most competitive pricing to address that issue.
Final question.
That's good. That's a good question.
Final question, I promise. This one, you and I have gone back and forth on this, but I don't think the public has heard our conversation yet. All-day kindergarten, not required by law, we're offering it, we've been providing it. But, and I'm supportive of all-day kindergarten. My question or concern is, why are we asking the taxpayers rather than the parents or the users to shoulder the $450,000 cost for that? Thank you.
Okay, well, that's a long answer that I'm gonna have to provide, but I'll be succinct. So we are one of only a handful of districts left in the Commonwealth that are still charging tuition to our families, for full-day kindergarten. The reason that we believe it to be necessary, and so we also believe anything that we are recommending and think is necessary for our students, that is a requirement of public education, shouldn't need to be shouldered by families. And we have been charging up until this year, $4,000 a year for our families to be able to have their children attend full-day kindergarten, which is a lot of money for many families, and we have a lot of families in town that have more than one child, so it's not $4,000 once, it's $4,000 5 times. And so this has been something that I believe the community's been discussing, even when it was first implemented during the 2012 school year. And so I think that what we've tried to do over the last 7 years that I've been here is to slowly phase it in. But each year that we would have phased the kindergarten tuition by charging less and less, we were in the middle of a pandemic, and we would have had to cut a significant number of our teaching staff or administrators or other support staff in order to phase in kindergarten. So we ended up being in a situation where, because we weren't able to phase it in, we had to make a decision. So we all truly believe that full-day kindergarten is necessary for kids these days. It allows them to come to school and not have a rushed 2.5-hour session. They're able to take their time. Many of our kindergartens don't move as quickly as we would like them to, as they're traveling from place to place, and there's a lot of transitions. And so giving the kids the opportunity they really should be having a good solid literacy base in kindergarten, and it's hard to do that in a 2.5-hour time period. And we don't want to put our families in a position where they're having to make a decision about whether or not they can send their child to full-day kindergarten or half-day if it becomes a financial issue. And so I think any of the towns that are left in the state that are still charging tuition are probably having the same conversations, that they know it's right. They know it's necessary for our kids developmentally to be in school. Our kids do really well in full-day kindergarten. They're ready to be there. And so it's the point where that's our recommendation, and we don't want to continue to charge our families to be able to offer that. And so I think that has gone on a little bit longer than anyone anticipated when it was first brought into Duxbury over 10 years ago.
Thank you.
This million, the $1.8 million for the market adjustment, is that pre-negotiation or post-negotiation?
That is simply the analysis of the 4% mark, that we're 4% below the market average. We would need to, we are currently in our last year of a 3-year contract with our Unit A teaching staff. The contract was extended for 1 year because there was so much up in the air this year in Duxbury with budget that we didn't feel as though having a new contract negotiation would be in anyone's best interest. So both parties agreed to have a contract extension. So we would need to go into a negotiation to discuss the next 3 years and what that would entail. But it's difficult to go into a contract negotiation knowing that you're 4% below market average, and that was back in 2023. So there could be another adjustment. So we're hoping to be able to go into that and negotiate with our teaching staff in a way that we can express the funding we have available in Duxbury to be able to get a fair compensation for them over the next 3-year period without losing a significant number of our teaching staff. We never want to go into a contract negotiation to be able to, and have to make up ground because we're below market average and then end up having to reduce 15 teachers as a result of providing a fair contract. So that is pre-contract, and we have 1 more year until the contract expires. So we'd be entering into a contract negotiation after probably the end of this school year, heading into the beginning of next school year.
My final question is that, I saw in one of the slides, the schools that, a typical district or your district, is an average of like 4 to 4.5% increase each year. And I asked Mary, if this 5.8 million is a sustainable budget over 2030, essentially that we don't have to go back to the well in 2 years. Do you feel comfortable with this number and that we have here in the school district?
It's really difficult to say what the schools will need for the next 5 years and to say 3% is going to be adequate. And so what I can say is that, the funding that we have in our real needs budget this year is very necessary in order to maintain the staffing levels and the student service levels that we currently have this year. If we were to look at a 3% increase for the schools over the next 5 years, I can't say that that wouldn't result in us having to look at our staffing to make adjustments. I can't say that no staff members would be eliminated over the next few years, but I can tell you that it would give us a sustainable base to be able to look forward, to be able to, when we're negotiating, to be able to live within those means. And so I think that that would put us in a healthy place. Typically, when we roll over our budget, before we look at any retirements or reductions, it ends up being between 3 and 6%, just year over year, and then we take a look at where we may be able to make some reductions. And I think different communities have a different approach to this, but I do see other school superintendents presenting their budgets across the state right now. We're so early, everyone else is just starting to present their budgets, and it is not unusual to just a town I saw yesterday. They went in with their budget presentation and they asked for, the schools asked for 8.91%. And it's not a similar situation to us where there's a potential override on the table. So I think we are willing to do everything we can to live within our means. We may have to make some adjustments, and some of the inflation costs and special education transportation can be unpredictable, but I think that we do know we have a few teachers that are scheduled to retire over the next few years, and at times we're able to look at those and see if we can perhaps not fill positions where we have retirements, or be able to hire in a newer teacher that's a little bit lower on the salary schedule. So that's our hope. So we are prepared to do that. We understand that we want to have a budget where we're not coming back to say that we're going to need additional funding, but I can't say that we won't have some reductions moving forward.
That question will be asked of all of the departments that have additional positions or increases in their department head. Is the Sustainable Task Force based the 5-year projections on a 3% increase cap for the next 5 years in order for the override that's being proposed to take us through. And one of the things that we had heard loud and clear is we're not having that much fun if we want to do this again next year and the year after. We'd like to do this and have the ability to project out at least 5 years to make sure that we're in a good place. And the schools are aware of that. Danielle and Lisa were both on, and Laurel were both all on the task force and were part of this conversation, so they're aware. Okay, Fran.
I think it's been a very good dialogue so far, but I think if Betsy, if we could get back to the business of the finance committee, and that is to try to push through this budget. I think if we could tonight look seriously at those line items that none of us have any serious reservations regarding, and there are numerous smaller budgets that we can eliminate tonight, and then we can focus on those, as was referred to earlier, as the hold items, and all of us probably have a budget or two that we'd like to have further discussion on. And we can have those departments heads come in, as Mary had suggested, later. But I think we should set as a goal for ourselves to try to get this wrapped up by the end of the month. If we could have a number that we could present that we're comfortable with, that the voters will have a chance to chew on between now and the second Saturday in March, I think it would be helpful. Having said that, I would like to just ask a couple of questions I could about the last page, the summarization. In round numbers, this $5.8 million override. It appears to me in the sheet that you're saving a little over $1 million of that number for the next 4 years. As raising the levy limit, we're not spending that money this year. The bulk of the issue, I think, has revolved around restoring 36 positions in various positions throughout the town. And then I think one where the rubber hits the road is there are 11 new positions that are being requested. Do you have when you're looking at the various line items, you've combined restore 2, add 1, et cetera, et cetera. Do you have a number of the cost for just the restoring of those 36 positions, roughly?
It's right here, it's right here, it's on the bottom of the page.
Wonderful.
Yep.
Small things. So of the 5.8 million, $1,734,000 is being used just to restore those 36 positions.
Correct.
Thank you. And just for everyone's benefit, $1,043,000 is being used to add those 11 new positions. You say 10, I counted 11, so let's call it 10, and the 10 new positions. And I think that's where a lot of the questions may come in. So if you may, Madam Chair, can we go to the first page and start looking at these budgets? Is the committee ready to start looking on that basis?
Are we going to do the full? Bring it up to suggestion?
Yes.
Well, you wanna go through all the 99 and,
Well, I say it's 8 o'clock.
Yep.
We usually end around 9:30.
8:30.
9, we'll compromise at 9, but we could probably move through here and obviously these smaller budgets. We're gonna be comfortable with, and then just the ones we really want to have for the dialogue we have on in this.
I'm so sorry.
Well, I was just trying to make the point that if we could get through some of the smaller, simpler budgets, for instance, town moderator, $40. Now, we're in a lot of debate about that. And as we go through this, there's several items like that, that are rather small. And then if we can then focus on the larger ones where we have questions, we can come back and do ensuing Thursdays to fully vet those with the department heads, so we get comfortable with the head count.
The numbers that have no adjustment are numbers that we have already adopted in the balanced budget. So we have really already approved those numbers that have no changes. What I want to make sure is that if there are additional questions from the select board or the community, that we haven't closed the door before they get a chance to ask any of those questions. So I hear what you're saying, and I felt the same way in the beginning, but upon reflection, it is not going to be a lot to both the ones that haven't changed as far as the time goes. And I want to use the time for this purpose, especially in the beginning when we have a lot of members of the community participating, looking at the change budgets. We have lined up some department heads. Yeah, I'll give it to you. We have lined up some department heads that will be available over the next 3 weeks to answer questions. So I hesitate to just to do that. I'm glad we had the schools here. I think if the select board has additional questions or if finance committee has additional questions for the schools, I think they'll be fairly straightforward. And I know that Danielle or Lisa or members of the school committee will be happy to come back, but I really wanted to get a lot of that out since it is the largest adjustment on departments. We can proceed with we can just go in order here as far as the changes go and see what we can deal with them. With Mary and Rainey being here, we could do the selectman's office, we can do any of the finance tonight and get us through for the next half hour. But if you'll bear with me, you can maybe wait and do the plans, because since we've already voted them, I think we've made our opinion known to the select board that
Fair enough.
we're in cahoots as far as those go, because we've done it once before. But why don't we wait a bit and make sure that there isn't any other input? So, yeah, you had a question?
I do.
There you go.
One quick question on the levy and the 3% that you're planning. Do we intend to raise the levy or have the ability to raise the levy still to 2.5% per year? And then on top of that, are we talking about another 3% on top of the 2.5% that we're allowed? And is that how you budgeted it?
No.
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 If I understand your question correctly, J.R., let me respond to it this way. Statutorily, we are limited to a 2.5% increase on the levy and no more when you're talking about the base tax levy. There are exceptions that increase the levy beyond 2.5%. Those are an override, an exclusion, or new growth. Those are the only three other potential options to increase the levy. So the answer is no. The tax levy, which is the sum total of all of our real estate and personal property taxes issued for a year, that total levy can only grow 2.5% per year, period.
So once we do the override, it will grow 2.5% on that added tax levy of the override.
The 5.8.
That is correct. Did everybody hear that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so it basically reestablishes your new levy.
Yeah.
By adding the 5.8 million, that becomes your new baseline. And then from that point forward, annually, you are limited to the 2.5% growth.
Madam Chair. Madam Chair. Sure. I'm very appreciative that the school department is here, school committee. So your point earlier,
Hold on, Brian.
Hold on.
There you go.
all right, to your point earlier, I'm appreciative of the school department, administration, and school committee being here. We haven't heard from members of the public. And we have a lot of people here and there have been questions from up here, but I wonder if there are questions about the budget from those in the back.
All right.
I'd be interested in hearing those before we move on to other.
Okay. That's just perfect. Do we have any questions from the public? So why don't we do this? I'm gonna bring the microphone back here so you all can hear. If you'd like to step to the podium, if you'd like to ask a question. And, go ahead. Sure. And, line up.
Well, thank you, man. Appreciate all the help and all the work that's gone into this. My name's Ian Dargan, 9 Arrowhead Road. I've been listening to this and I'm on a fixed budget, so I'm a little concerned. I appreciate Brian bringing up that point. Couple of things, actually three. The question of the kindergarten expenses. That's something that's been considered, I guess, and brought up recently. But let me say that I don't have any kids in school and I'm on a fixed budget. Why is my tax dollars being used to give? Yeah, I understand. I've been there. I had a young family at one time, but at this point in time, and I'll elaborate that a little bit better. But I asked the question. I think it's about $2 million delta in that line item.
Yeah.
It wasn't clear to me how much.
I think it's 450.
$450,000. Okay, well, that's not as bad.
All right, so great, so good night.
What's your vote? It's still a chunk. And the other thing I wanted to mention, AIAA has grant funds, so we're talking about administrative staff, duties, and I read that earlier, I'm not sure if it fits perfectly, but AIAA is an opportunity for grant funding for teachers. I don't know how many school teachers are aware of that, but there may be other sources. AIAA, by the way, is the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. And they provide about a $200 to $500 stipend once or twice a year to science and math instructors. Something that might help in a small way provide some additional funds. And lastly, I want to say that we're not in a bubble in that our funding, we're not affected by state or federal actions. And I just mentioned what that tragedy in California, what's going on now with the misfunding, $17 million in fire caused a lot of additional damage. I'm saying if I'm investing in stock, I'm going to go to cash if things look risky. Should we not try to clear the cost between wants and needs a little bit better and try to cut back? I know you have a certain budget each year, and that budget pretty much stays, you get used to it, let's say. Now's the time, I think, to tighten things up a lot more, especially since we don't know what the effect, Warren Healy's $1 billion expense for immigrants to this state. We don't know the exact outcome, the long-term effects of that will be. We, as a town, I guess recently Milton lost their appeal to some extent. At least the judge ruled in favor of the state, but not necessarily as far as the regulations go. That still remains to be seen. But there's still some questions out there that haven't been addressed fully. And then also the DOGE in the federal level. All of these things are uncertainties that haven't been, or we're guessing at what the outcome is. We're thinking, okay, based on past performance, this is what's going to be. Going forward, it's a guess. And I'm just saying, maybe better be safe than sorry and cut back on our expenses. Thank you.
Does anyone else have a question for the school department? Since we've got everybody here that can answer.
You take comment or just question?
If you'd like to, but we'd like to keep moving through and you know, you're welcome to, but we'd like to keep working on the budget. But if you've got something that. Yeah. See, there's no 3 pages printed, so.
There's never 3 pages then. So we've talked in a lot of detail, by the way, Jay's Valley Street. We've talked in a lot of detail about specific line items, and we floated some very big numbers, and 5.8 million is a very big number. And I understand that that raises different feelings and different reactions for different people. But I think as we move forward, this initiative is going to come down to 3 factors. It's going to come down to health and safety, academic excellence, and public works and community service. And I think that as we go about having our conversations and we talk to people, we have to think about the kitchen table questions as well. So when the smoke alarm goes off at 2 a.m. and it's not the battery and it's real, we want the fire department to be able to respond in the appropriate amount of time. When your child or your neighbor's child or your friend's child or whomever needs literacy support or math support or some kind of social emotional learning support, you want them to be able to get it in the schools. When there's a snowstorm or a hailstorm or a rainstorm and the roads are obstructed, if we want to talk about financial impact, I think you want your road to be clear so that you can drive your car and drop your kid off at daycare and get to work, so that you don't have to take a sick day or a personal day because you can't get down your road. These are the kinds of things we're talking about. These are not aspirational wants, with due respect, they're needs. And the needs are real, and the time is now. And the only other thing I want to say, especially for members of the select board and the finance committee, we can frickin' frack at this thing from now until town meeting. But if you look at the calculator, and I don't know how many of you have used the calculator, if you calculate the financial impact, the average impact based on an average assessment of $1.2 million, the average impact is $82.83 a month for the $5.8 million amount. Now, if you want to tinker at this and reduce it by $1 million, the impact will go down to $68.25 for a difference of $14.50 a month. So is it worth that kind of difference to look at this thing and try to frick here and fret, or can we actually admit that these needs are real and we ought to fund them for the betterment of all of us? Because we want to be safer, we want to be smarter, we want to be stronger. And I think this is the way to do it. So thank you for your work and thank you for your time. And for any math teacher here, I showed my work.
And I can verify.
And I don't want to speak after Jesus, but I do want to just respond really briefly to your comments. When we talk about the impact of school administrators and the necessity of that, you mentioned grant funding. I can think of $700,000 in grants that 2 of our school administrators wrote, and those are the individuals in our school department that are able to do a lot of the grant writing. We're always open to grants, and if any members of our community are aware of grants that we haven't tapped into, that's the kind of thing that we need to have, always have a handle on. Secondly, to that, I think that it's really important, you said, why should any taxpayer have to pay for kindergarten when people are on a fixed income? And I think that it's really important to not look at full day kindergarten as a bonus or an enhancement, but it's a necessary part of our public schools and our town, the offerings that our town has. So I know that's difficult to understand, but it's not an extra. It's not a benefit. It's really necessary for our kids. A lot of our kids need that full day structure to be able to advance in the grades and not consistently be at risk moving forward with that. And what was your third? You said the grants, the
Well, just the future expenses, anticipating what will be.
Yep, and so I wanted to just say, while we're all here, our FY 26 budget that we're presenting represents $140,000 in expense reductions and 5.8 positions we're reducing. And so every single year when we're doing our budgeting, if there's ways that we can cut costs, we're not just coming to the town and asking for more. And so even with that real needs budget, we have a number of reductions. So I just wanted to let you know that we're not just increasing our expense costs, we are definitely always consolidating too, so. Thank you.
Peter, I only have 5 pages. Hi, everyone, Peter Quigley, Long Point Lane. Just a couple of high-level comments. Duxbury is a really unique community in Massachusetts. In 1980, it looked about the same as it did now. And when Prop 2.5 was passed, it was a reaction to a period, Jimmy Carter was the president, there was a near 20% inflation. Tax rates during the 70s were going up at astronomical rates. So it was an effort to suppress the growth in taxes. And the 2.5 was not a magic number. It was a fixed number, and there was a mechanism in place.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Could you hold the mic a little closer?
Sure,
We're getting
yes.
feedback here.
Yeah, there's a mechanism put in place, which is an override. But what I wanted to say is the offset for growth in expenditures, which is greater than 2.5%, was growth. Duxbury's not growing. If you look around Massachusetts in 45 years, there's not a community that hasn't changed dramatically by growth. Extensive commercialization. If you drive on Tremont Street in any of our neighboring communities, Washington Street, etc., if you leave Duxbury, the change in the last 45 years in our neighbors' communities is dramatic. That has expanded the revenue. We don't have that. That's why many of us cherish Duxbury. It is a no slow growth community. It will be, it has been. On average, the 350 communities in Massachusetts have tried to override their budgets every 5 years. This is hard data. You can go look it up on the DEP website. They've been successful in less than every 10. Duxbury with no growth has not attempted an override in 34 years. It's really not a badge of honor. Because if we cherish the community we have, we've limited commercial growth. It doesn't look like any other community in the last 45 years. That comes at a cost. And what I have said for 20 years, had I known what I know now about the underinvestment in public education in Duxbury, I'm not sure I would have made the trade-off. The environment is spectacular, but we are one of the most affluent communities in the Commonwealth. We're in the bottom third of spending in public education. I just can't reconcile that. So I think when you think about the growth and prosperity in Duxbury, the uniqueness of our community, our desire to preserve it, and our underfunding consistently, I'm very skeptical that 1 million excess over the next 4 years is going to account for the needed growth in services in terms of expenses. So if we're gonna do this, I really think it's important. We recognize we're not good at this. We haven't done it in 34 years. Situate's done it 5 times successfully. Hingham's done it 5 times. Let's, if we're gonna do this, even if it's not till next year, let's do it for enough so we can invest in our infrastructure and also keep Duxbury the way it is and why many of us cherish being here. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So we're gone. Okay.
I'm coming.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
No.
Sue Schofield, James Road. I love Duxbury. I love the people that live here. And I appreciate all of the people that have participated on the boards crunching numbers. I don't want to get into individual items on the budget. I really struggle with the proposition 2.5, the override. I'm concerned, like Mr. Quigley said, there's a lot of people, we're all here for a reason. And there's a lot of people that are here in this town that are barely hanging on. Yes, it's an affluent community, but not everybody in town is affluent. I love all the people that live in Duxbury, and I know you all do too. So we have to find a balance, and we have to take care of our infrastructure. I was at the select board meeting the other night when we discussed our needs for the water. I mean, the numbers were staggering. But we've been building, new schools, fire department, senior center, DPW. We've been doing all of this building. I don't know what the answer is. But I really struggle with the tax increase and I'm really upset that we're in the position that we're in because we haven't maybe raised taxes along the way. And now it's such a big struggle. I mean, yeah, there's different ways to raise money. All of our assessments on our houses just went up. I mean, I open up my tax bill. Hey, I can pay it. It's not about me. It's about everybody in this community. And I don't know what the answer is, but I'm just here out of concern for everybody. Thank you.
All right, okay. To the schools. Yes, very good. Yep.
Excellent. Hello, my name is Jack Rubin. I'm a senior at Duxbury High School. I'm also the senior class president for the class of 2025, as well as I'm the first student in Duxbury history to have been elected as state president. And the reason why I mention that is because I have seen almost too many schools across the state. And I will say, if we're looking at these numbers and we're looking at these proposals, I think it's important to look at the faces who are going to be impacted by the decisions we make. And so I know many of my peers, many of my, many of the school staff is here. And as a student at Duxbury High School, I have to say the opportunities available for students are pivotal And frankly, I would be, distraught to see them go away. As a senior who has just applied to, prospective colleges and who has really developed a deep passion for government and for public service, I would find it impossible to see how I would have been able to do that without the current resources available to students at Duxbury. The proposed cuts, I think it's around 24 positions that would be lost at Duxbury High School, are not acceptable. And I deeply understand that, these are struggling financial times and, it's never easy to add anything to, your tax bill. I see it with my parents and it's not easy. But if we're looking at what cutting 24 school staff members would do, I mean, class sizes are already high enough. And if you look at Hanover too, where they've had issues with their, faculty and even just getting teachers in the classroom, their class sizes are going way up. And that's just not a healthy classroom environment. You need to have that personal connection with the teacher, the personal connection with, the school staff so that they can help you develop your passions, develop your interest for learning and succeed. I mean, Duxbury is a community based on excellence, and that's founded at the, root of academic excellence. And really to be able to accomplish that, we need to make sure that our educational opportunities are preserved and well maintained. And so I know it's very difficult to talk about, financial matters. I know you're probably thinking, I'm just an 18-year-old kid, what do I know about, taxes and all of that? But I think if we're thinking about the proposals, I just want you all to keep in mind that who's gonna be impacted, because it's me, it's my friends, it's the freshmen who I, interact with in the halls and I see, and I would just hate to see them not have the same opportunities I did, and to be able to grow the same way that I did. Thank you.
It is now 8:30, and we have some decisions to make on how late we're gonna go and what we want to accomplish tonight. We, our schedule is that we're gonna be doing this, and I deliberately taking the schools on tonight because it was the biggest change, and I assumed that it would take more time and perhaps have more questions than some of the other smaller items. We could, proceed for a little bit or until 9, or we can call it a night and see you next Thursday, whatever the committees. Yes, Chuck.
So
Here you go.
I guess my question is, if we're going to open this up every week, there'll be probably an additional new people next week.
Yeah.
Are we gonna have to go through the same review process every
No.
week? Okay. Thank you.
No worries. The review of the revenue is on the website. I'm sure that's being covered, but it can be seen there, and it's fairly straightforward.
Well, the reason I'm asking that is that.
I know, it's ridiculous. We'll have more than one
No,
microphone in the future.
The reason I'm asking that is not because, I think everyone should have a chance to give their input, sure, but. We're gonna have to change the way we do these meetings if we're gonna spend 2 hours reviewing everything and we start at 6:30 and then we end at 8:30.
Right.
So we're gonna have to do one of two things, either have more meetings or have something started in the beginning where you have the questions and then we get into, because we're never gonna get to this.
Right, and that was my concern, which is why originally we were going to open it up to public comment at the end so that we could accomplish a little bit more, but tonight that didn't happen. So we're going to proceed, I think, from the future to working through these because they are smaller departments. They're a much smaller asks, and I think will be a lot more straightforward on answers. Fernando, you had something you wanted to say? So yes, I hear you, Chuck, and I share the same concerns, but I'm going to be a taskmaster.
So, yeah, Chuck and friend, I've been on the finance committee for 3 years, and this is the way.
Select board.
I've been on the finance committee, right?
Okay, I remember.
Yeah, I wasn't, I remember that. Well, I have a short memory, yes. I was on the finance committee.
We were just trying to forget it.
Yeah, it was that bad an experience for you guys, sorry. Anyway, I understand, in the finance committee, we have a way of working. this is, I just want to repeat again, the override hasn't been done for 34 years, right? This is new, this is extremely concerning. People are passionate in one way or the other. They're concerned about their tax bills, they're concerned about not getting the experience they need at the schools, right? So we're gonna have to have a bit of patience and let people speak, let people provide comments, and we're just gonna have to just work our way through this.
I agree with all that. I agree with all that, but it's 8:30.
Yeah.
Okay,
This is
so should we go till 10?
No.
From now on? Or should we?
Come and join the select. But Chuck, we will, this is the first night, and we haven't been very efficient. We probably spent half an hour passing the frigging microphone around, so hopefully next Thursday, we'll have pac-tv and we'll have a better, much better audio visuals and all that kind of stuff, so we will get better. And Betsy will be the taskmaster and we'll get better and we'll work our way through this.
I think that makes sense. You know, these meetings get, after 8:30, everybody's kind of like, whoa, right? It's a lot of information was shared today, especially with Mary and Rainey and Betsy and the schools. I think that we will get better and we'll get more efficient. I think somebody got their 10,000 plus steps in today with just running around with their microphones.
There you
right?
go.
But I think maybe adjourn at 8:30 tonight.
Yep.
And then come back next Thursday, and we wanna be fresh, and we wanna be crisp, and we want to be able to answer collectively in a very thoughtful, meaningful way. So we hear from all constituents.
Yes. Thank you.
Man,
Yes, please.
looking at the calendar, we only have 3 more Thursdays in the month of January.
Right.
And so can we conceivably consider doing Tuesday and Thursdays?
No.
Stay late in that case.
We're doing, beg your pardon?
Sorry, stay late in that case. Let's be here every night.
Well, traditionally, this committee has met Tuesday and Thursday nights. To get through the things. Do they have, why do they have to join us?
Because this was for their benefit. So that they're,
I give up.
I know.
Thank you, Fred.
So, let's do this. I have, yeah, very close. We're gonna divide this up so that we know that we have to accomplish a certain amount each of the Thursdays, so we can guarantee it will be done. And, if that means that goes a little past 8:30, then that's okay, but, we will work to trying to keep it down to a dull bore. And we have department heads that don't necessarily have to speak if there are no questions, but will be available to quickly respond to any of your questions that you might have or any further questions that the finance committee had. So I will work on dividing this up with Mary, if that's
Yeah,
okay.
to that point, can I just announce what the lineup is sort of?
Sure, that would be great.
So that folks can plan?
Yep.
So I had mentioned earlier that we have organized with the department heads to be available for these conversations, very much like the school department was here this evening. So I just want to give you guys a preview of the schedule. So for next Thursday, the 16th of January, we have organized public safety as well as facilities for our next meeting. So police, fire, municipal services, harbor master, and facilities. For January 23rd, I've organized DPW. So all varieties of water, sewer, highway, vehicle maintenance, etc. So our DPW staff will be there. And then for January 30th, it's culture and recreation. So that includes council on aging, veteran services, all of our rec departments, the beach, the pool, the lifeguards, parks, etc. And our final meeting, if we still need it for the 6th, would be any other housekeeping or business items, more than likely for Rainey and I to go over. So that's the lineup, if anybody is trying to build their calendar on which nights they want to be here.
Can you, wait a second, hold on. I only have 9,990. Go.
So that, I'm hoping to get the location and whether we're going to be live streamed. I think it's so important for residents to come out and participate in this so that instead of baking the cake and handing it to them baked, I think if the community comes out, has questions, there, whether or not there are adjustments to any of these line items or not based on those comments, again, we need, the residents need to have a buy-in here, and so I really am hoping, I'm asking, again, that we have a venue that is not only live streamed, so people can watch and participate from home, but is also, accessible to the community.
Just to that point.
And I'm back.
Sorry. It's, yes, Amy, we're working on logistics, because there are some scheduling conflicts that we're trying to work around, but just for everyone's information, not only do we have a very good sized crowd here this evening, and again, thank you all for coming out, but there's also 40 people who are connected to the Zoom session, so please don't think that you are only reaching the people in this room. Those folks chose to participate remotely. If they chose, I've been following the question and answers. There have been none from the public that are joined this in this manner, but we are providing an opportunity for the community to reach us. So I just want you to be aware of that.
Okay, Cindy?
Just a quick one. Go ahead. Mary, you didn't mention anything about the general government, when we're going to go over, you know, from town meeting for facilities management, planning board, conservation committee.
So that was partly scheduled for this evening. But I will cover most of those and I will be here, so.
Okay.
So that was partly scheduled for this evening, with the expectation that we get through some of them. Since we didn't, and most of those departments are departments that I can handle, I will be available at any one of our meetings to cover those.
Thank you. As we go through, I know Fran probably thinks I wasn't listening, but I was. We will continue to, you know, try to fill in if we've got a minute. That's why I think it's gonna be important to go through what we need to get accomplished that night and then open it up to, open questions, because it's just gonna be the more efficient way to get our job done. And that the town deserves to get a number and get an answer, and that's gonna be our top priority. So,
I probably missed this, and you already probably said it. What does it take a town meeting for the resolution to pass or fail? Is it 50-50?
majority, and then the following 2 weeks later, a ballot.
On the ballot,
Mhm.
so it has to pass both parties.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so I'm not seeing a real appetite with this crowd to stay any longer tonight. I think, friend, friend wants to stay. Anybody want to stay with friend?
I don't want to stay. Question, Rainey, when will we be seeing, the other articles on the warrant? And can we use the Tuesday nights?
Yes.
Not with the joint session, to start reviewing your articles that are coming?
You have a meeting Tuesday night.
We have a meeting next Tuesday.
Community preservation.
Wonderful.
We'll see you Tuesday.
See you Tuesday.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
I was gonna.
All those in favor? Oh, wait,
We vote.
one moment. Before we didn't vote.
Board's gonna go to close the.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, good.
Nancy, we closed our meeting.